boundless compassion. Absorbing world sounds awakened, Buddha light is this Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light we call this, in the dark we call this, moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sound awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light we call this, in the dark we call this, moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens the Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light we call this, in the dark we call this, moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this.
Again, welcome to our November Day of Zen. And I'm glad to be able to sit in person with a few of you, and also welcome those of you from all four corners of the world, including, I see Nympha. Are you in the Philippines now or are you in the States?
I'm in Houston.
Oh, okay. Welcome back.
Thank
And
you.
everyone else, California, Florida, from Boston. So we may be separated by geography, but we are one right here, right now. And that is the spirit with which I'd like to offer a verse of Zen Master Dogen as our launching pad, as our takeoff point for our invitation to the experience of true self. There's a verse in Dogen's writings that is often repeated in many contexts from the collection which was compiled later called the Shobo Genzo, or the Treasury of the Eye of True Dharma. That compilation has many chapters which came from the talks that he gave, and they were transcribed by one of their practitioners and later handed down to us as our ways of being able to launch ourselves into the world that Zen Master Dogen himself had been living in and had conveyed to all of those who sat with him. the verse that I have in mind to offer for today's launching pad is like this. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. By the way, is there an echo? Can you stop? Can you mute that one?
Everybody might not record, we're just trying, so please just.
So the Dogen verse that I'm referring to is from his chapter called Genjo Koan, the matter at hand. Genjo means precisely that which is before us, fully manifest, embodied right here in our midst. Genjo. And Koan is a statement of a case that invites anyone who listens to be able to embody that case, or to personalize it, or to make oneself one with it. So the matter at hand, an invitation for you to taste that, experience that, and be that, the matter at hand. Genjo Koan. And the verse goes, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things of the universe. To be actualized by the myriad things of the universe is to drop one's own body-mind and to drop the other's body-mind. To drop one's own body-mind and to drop the other's body-mind is to live in a realm with no trace of enlightenment. And that no trace of enlightenment remains endlessly. That's the verse, and that's the translation. There are several other translations of Dogen and of this verse, of course. But I'd like to take these words of Dogen as our hint for what we are up to here. We are seated together in that spirit of oneness. And each one of us comes to this sit with your own aspiration to probe into and to resolve the matter of life and death. The big question of who am I, really, ultimately? What was I born for in this earth? What am I called to accomplish? Knowing that my life is limited, I am a mortal being. I live in an impermanent world that keeps changing from moment to moment. And yet the question keeps nagging at me and at each of us. What is this about, really? And what's the point of it all? Again, who am I? And now we have the awakened one, Shakyamuni Buddha, who has shown us the way. He has shown us a way of living this life that is at peace with oneself, that is truly able to see things just as they are, and therefore is able to see things with equanimity and with loving kindness and compassion and with sympathetic joy. Those four words that I mentioned, equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, are called the four immeasurables, the characteristics of one who has realized the boundless heart, the boundless reality that consists in who we are all, and consists in the most obvious and most clear response to the question, who am I? That boundless reality. And Shakyamuni realized that and embodied it in his life. And so it is said that he saw that realm when he was 35. And so he then was moved to go back to the village and live among the people, taking off his retreats every now and then, but coming back and sharing what he realized until the age of 80, when he passed on to Nirvana. So his life then was dedicated to simply living that reality that he saw and realized and began to embody at 35, and was then someone who simply witnessed to it and lived it and showed it to people, sometimes using words. And the words that he used were handed down, were remembered by disciples. There was no writing yet at the time, and they were then jotted down later when writing became a cultural artifact. And these are what we have preserved in the Pali scriptures. And then later on, other people who also realized the way based on the Buddha's instructions had their own inspiration to compose ways of articulating that way, that enlightened way that the Buddha had realized. And so we have this whole corpus of Buddhist scriptures. But we know that our Zen tradition does not rely on words or scriptures, but is simply able to take those as pointers to that reality that is beyond any words or scriptural texts. So what we are taking with Dogen now is not so much a scriptural text that we must believe and therefore bow to and try to make ourselves one with, but to simply see it as a launching pad, as a jumping board, as a way of entering into the depths of the life of awakening that the Buddha realized, which Dogen, Zen Master Dogen himself realized, 13th century Japan, and is now pointing to us with these words. And we keep hearing time and again that words are like a finger pointing to the moon. So to study the Buddha way, that's what we are wanting to study. And the word study here does not mean academic study. It's simply an English translation of a word in Chinese, Japanese that can mean study, to learn, to embody, to practice, to become one with, to master. All of those English translations can apply to that word gaku or manabu. So to learn, embody, become one with, to master the way of awakening is no other than to study, learn, practice, embody, master oneself. That oneself is something we need to pay attention to. That true self that consists in that boundless reality beyond time and space, that manifests itself in so many myriad things that enables us to answer the question, who am I? And realize that deep peace, realizing that we are not separate, we are not alone, we are not isolated from anyone, but that we are one with that boundless reality. And that makes us at peace, and that also brings forth loving kindness and compassion and joy as we go through our day-to-day life. So to study the way of awakening is to study the self. And yet, the next line goes, to study the self is to forget the self. So now we are sitting here trying to get that point that we're hearing. What is that self? Breathing in, breathing out. What is that self? Who am I? What is this all about? So those questions keep popping up at the back of our mind, or sometimes right there at the forefront of our mind. And we are invited to simply allow those questions to be addressed and allow this practice to take us to a place of stillness, where that idea of self that began to goad us in our practice is now dissolved and forgotten. And what remains? Breathing in, breathing out, the sound of a vehicle nearby, could be the sound of a bird or a dog barking or the whir of the air conditioner. And yet in all of that, those are no longer sounds from outside or the things I see in front of me, the floor, other sitters, the wall, the clock, those are no longer things outside, but simply a manifestation of what that inner world of stillness is all about. To study the self is to forget the self and to allow, and so again, that already brings us to the next line. To forget the self is to actualize and be actualized by the myriad things of the universe. What is that? What does that mean? This English translation, actualize, is also just one among several that can be taken. Another way of translating that word is to be enlightened by. The word sho seraruru. Sho is a proof, authentication of something. It is used as a mark of authenticity. When you have that mark, that seal of sho in from a government agency, then that means that you're official, you're the real thing. So to be realized, to be actualized, to be embodied in, to be made real and to be made who you are by the myriad things of the universe. And what are the myriad things of the universe? That's again another English expression for what in Japanese and Chinese is two characters, 10,000 phenomena. Bansho. What is 10,000 phenomena? What are 10,000 phenomena? Well, the floor, other sitters, the trees, the clouds, dogs, cats, the whole shebang of this universe of form. All the forms and shapes and textures of the universe actualize that true self. So who am I? Take the hint. Forget that self that you're looking for, thinking that I am this self with this characteristic of with my age, with my height, with my particular bodily proclivities, my psychological background and makeup and so on. That's the little self that we think we are, and that's the basic delusion that human beings go through that causes all of this mess that we're in together as our global society. Forget that self and let that true self actualized by the myriad things be manifest and embodied. So who am I? Floor, wall, Satkartar, Helen, Eric. Each and every one of these names presents or points to a form that is among the myriad things of the universe. But they are a hint to answering your question. As I look at each and every one of you, and as I look at the screen, referring to each and every one of you, as you ask the question, who am I? This hint of Zen Master Dogen. What is the self? The self is forgotten among the lilies, and yet now it is actualized in the myriad things of the universe. So stick, who am I? Stick, wall, cloud, dog, cat. Nonsense, ain't it? That's what Zen is rumored to be, or rather reported to be. A lot of nonsense. Somebody asks something and then the answer by a Zen master is way, way off the playground. Like, does a dog have Buddha nature or not? And the Zen master, Joshu, answers, "Moo." What sense can you make out of that? It is precisely in jumping through this sense that we make with our rational mind that is based on our subject-object duality, our way of understanding that there's an egoic consciousness that sees the world as objects out there. That is precisely the basic delusion that we carry throughout our lives and makes up this mess of what we are. And it is precisely in seeing through that and in overcoming that and dissolving that separation, that barrier between the self and the so-called object, and realizing that each and every myriad thing of each and every one of these myriad things of the universe is precisely a hint the pointer that we will realize in answering the question, who am I really? But yet, Dogen goes on. To be actualized by the myriad things of the universe is to drop off one's own body-mind and drop off the other's body-mind. That is just a reinforcement of what he said earlier about the myriad things. If you're looking for yourself, look around you. It's there, obvious. It's looking at you. Here's looking at you, babe. And so he reinforces that by the next saying, to be actualized by the myriad things is to forget that sense that I have my own body mind and then the others have their own body mind. That is the delusion also that keeps us astray. Forget about it. As the New Yorkers would say, forget about it. But just what? Floor. When the bell rings, bong, we stand up, we bow. Then when it's time for kinhin or walking meditation, we take each step, and each step is among the myriad things of the universe that in its own singular form becomes the answer to your question. Who am I? Some of you are practicing with a koan mu. So if you're asking yourself the question, what is mu? It's exactly the answer to the same question, who am I? What is mu and who am I point to exactly the same thing. And so what's your hint? The myriad things of the universe. Look around you. No other than that, no separation. But that will remain nonsense if you just take it on the realm of language, in the realm of logic, in the realm of conceptual form. How can that little table be myself? How can this little cushion be myself? Nonsense in that world of ordinary conversation and logic. But we are invited to enter into that realm of silence, into that realm of stillness, and precisely overcome those barriers of self and object. And all these things make sense. And when that appears, every trace of enlightenment goes away because there's no longer any enlightenment and non-enlightenment. It's just that. It's just the way things are. To live life the way things are. And what's the way things are? Not what you think it is. The way things are really is according to that realm where you have overcome that separation of the little self and the idea of the object as those that are separate from yourself, and allow the flow of the universe to just take care of my life. I grow old, I get sick, I die, and yet I know there is no such thing as growing old. There is no such thing as death. There is no such thing as something outside of me. And yet there is no inside either. It's just that. To live according to the way things are. And the way things are also includes that reality that the way things are is all the pains and the sufferings of sentient beings, all the cries of the hungry children of the world, all the despaired plaints of the refugees, all of those who have lost out in COVID and are dying in COVID. Those are my pains, the way things are. And my heart is moved with compassion, seeking my own way of living as a little gift that I can offer towards alleviation of the sufferings of those who are also embodiments of who I am. I can say more, but I will only use words to decorate what I've already sought to point out. What Dogen's words are pointing out is simply one thing, and it's right there, right now. Let us enter again into that silence throughout our remaining parts of our day of Zen and allow that realm to be as clear as the noonday sun and allow us to rejoice and be grateful for the rest of our lives.
Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light we call this, in the dark we call this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing those sounds awakens the Buddha right here. Is Buddha the source of compassion? This Buddha is only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. As the pure heart always rejoices. In the light we call this, in the dark we call this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but bliss.
We'll have some right after this one here. Again, let's have that down this way. We'll be up. And the Doksan group is just the next door. And after the in-person persons, then we would have Doksan with the ones who are tuning in on
Can you hear me?
Um,